What's good, people? We got the breaking news. Dalvin Cook finally cut. Well, we've all been talking about this offseason, what everybody wanted to finally get a resolution to. He's gone. The Vikings have officially cut Dalvin Cook. Tom Pelissero was the first to report it. NFL.com reported it. It's official. Cook is no longer a Minnesota Viking. So let's jump in and talk about how that's going to affect the Vikings and Cook moving forward.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.
All right. So I'm your host, Jesse Moore. Thank you for coming in to the Rantings of a Fantasy Football Fanatic. And we were talking about Dalvin Cook and the Minnesota Vikings today. It's big news. If you're on Twitter at all, it's just coming across the timeline. Everybody's saying, sell Alexander Madison. Where's Cook going to end up? And this is obviously Dynasty Streets because Dynasty Show. So that's what we do. But I kind of wanted to break it down a little bit, put a little bit more context into it because it's not just as simple as sell Alexander Madison or where's Cook going to end up, right? There's a lot of context with this. The Vikings backfield is particularly interesting, so let's break that down first. We have Alexander Madison, who's the presumed lead back. We have Ty Chandler, the rookie from last year, who's 25 years old. And we have Dwayne McBride, the 7th-round pick out of what school? I can't remember what school it is. UAB. And he is a lot younger, so he's a little bit more interesting. And he was called the best pure runner or one of the best pure runners in the class. So it's kind of interesting. You have 3 different players. Alexander Madison's just a dude. Like, he's put up similar numbers to Dalvin Cook. But I put out a tweet earlier a few weeks ago that I wanted to kind of touch base on. And I'll show it to you guys right here. So give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. All right, there it is. So his career high opportunity share has only been 37%. And the snap share, 35%. So he's played 4 years, right? This will be them. And the most he's ever played, 35% of the snaps. Highest amount of opportunity shares, he said, 37%. Now, the interesting part about that is, as it shows there, is Dalvin Cook only played 13 games that year. So if you take away that one season, Alexander Madison has averaged a 24% opportunity share and a 23% snap share. That's not great. Now, why is that? It's because Dalvin Cook was just good. He was better, and Alexander Madison was not going to force his way onto the field. If you go to Alexander Madison and you look at his career stats, they're not great. They're solid. Like, he gets some receptions. He puts up some pretty mediocre yards per carry. He's got some rushes. His career high rushing attempts, 134. The most rushing yards he's had in the season, 491, right? Total, the most amount of touchdowns is actually last year set a career high in touchdowns of 6. Do you want to know the most fancy points per game he's ever averaged? That was in 2021. It was 7.9. So, yeah, people want to sell Alexander Madison for a first. I don't think that's a realistic possibility. I mean, maybe you can get a first. Cool. If you can get a first for him, go sell him. It's better than Madison. That's just a smart bet to make. Realistically, but if you look actually to the second part of my tweet that I was talking about, that's more interesting to me. So it's Gibson right here. They were actually back-to-back in Dynasty ADP, according to Bulletproof. Madison was RB41. Gibson was RB42. Madison's going to skyrocket in value. So what you do now, you don't sell him for the first. You take Madison, and you get a plus added on to Gibson, and that's where you get rid of Madison. You're just a better back. Like, especially in PPR, like, we want those receiving backs, right? That would be my go-to move. I was already saying just flip him straight across. Now you can get a plus because his value's gone up. So, yeah, get a second added on to Gibson, or 2-3 swap. Gibson coming your way, the 2 years way. Madison and a 3 going that way. I'm totally fine with that. I don't expect Madison to be really an impact fantasy asset, right? He's never shown that in his career. Now he has, in limited opportunities, he's put up similar numbers to Cook. It's just the Vikings situation is getting pretty interesting. They're moving on from some big name veterans, so we don't really know what they're doing. I'm expecting that they are restructuring money and getting ready to pay Jefferson and make him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. And it's going to be a mega payday. So they're setting themselves up for that. And they're also kind of tooling for the future. So it is a little bit interesting. But you also have Jordan Addison there. Those are going to be their 2 main pieces. They still have TJ Hawkinson. So, like, that's going to be their core. They're going to build around the skill players. Madison's just going to be a part of it. I don't expect him to be. He's there for a 2-year deal. It's pretty cheap. Like, he's 21st on annual average value per running back. So it's just kind of just like he's a guy. So they might have him. Realistically, McBride and Chandler are just short-term assets. They're the best case scenario for them is one of them, and realistically, it's probably McBride because Chandler's already 25 years old. He's older than Alexander Madison. Like I don't really see the appeal with Chandler. Like he's an explosive back. He's got a really good speed score. He transferred to North Carolina in his senior year in college, and that's where he kind of blew up. He played at Tennessee previously, but he didn't really do anything. He had 182 rushing attempts. He had over 1,000 yards and 14 total touches his senior year in North Carolina in 2021. With a pretty good squad with Sam Howell and those guys. So yeah, he did that. McBride dominated inferior competition. Last year, he had 233 rushing attempts, 1,713 yards, 19 touchdowns. The guy was just a monster. The thing about McBride is he's negative in the passing game. They even asked him, and he said, "Look, like I was just such a good runner. Like they never asked me to catch the ball," which made sense because he's averaged 7 yards a clip. So like, why would you pass when you could just give him the rock and he's going to run at 7 yards, right? But yeah, he's pretty much a negative as a receiver. That's not anything he's going to profile as. I know people say he's going to be a workhorse. Technically, as like a rusher, he could be a workhorse, but realistically, like these are day three guys. You know what it is about day three running backs. They're short-term investments. Do not invest like heavily for them. If you want to pay a third for one of those guys as a backup, sure, if you have a particular fancy for it, but don't pay a second for McBride or don't pay a second for Chandler. That's just, you're just wasting capital. If you want to throw a third, sure, it's a third round picks. Like it's a completely guessing game. So yeah, if I was going to target somebody, I would target McBride. Chandler, I don't want to pay for a 25-year-old backup running back who we don't even know if they're good, right? It's not the Tony Pollard situation where you know they're good, or it's not the Alexander Madison situation, which previously was, where the guy could step in and produce at least, even though if he wasn't that great of a running back, right? I would rather just dart throw on McBride or send some wide receiver that's just a bench stash for me, like, Terrace Marshall plus, like, right? I use the value on Terrace Marshall. I gave McBride and a plus back, like a 3 back, ideally, because I don't think you're going to get it 2. You can shoot for a 2 if you want to, but send me McBride in a 3, and I'll happily send you Terrace Marshall or a deal like that, right? Where you're sending a wide receiver who realistically the range of outcome just isn't going to give you anything. So you might as well just take the draft capital and the running back. At least they have a shot to gain substantial value. If Alexander Madison goes down, right, they can step into that role and produce for you in the short term. Long term, neither one of those guys is going to be anything. So yeah, if you have long-term aspirations for them, don't. It's strictly backup handcuff status, and they could, best case scenario is they could play one season, right, and be an impact guy for one season. You see this with backup day 3 running backs all the time. Guy goes down, gets hurt, somebody steps in, they produce for a year, the community will hype them up. Realistically, they get replaced. That's just how it works. NFL teams don't trust D3 guys. We were actually having this conversation with my buddy Tim on Twitter today about Sam Howell and how he's a significantly worse bet than Jordan Love because he's a day 3 guy. He's never proven he's good. He's like a 5.040. Like he doesn't have speed. So that rushing profile looks pretty fraudulent. So I don't see the upside case with Sam Howell. Like there's no realistic path where he even has the job this year. We don't know that compared to Jordan Love, who's round 1 quarterback. If Jordan Love is good this year, he's going to lock up a long-term deal. With Sam Howell, if he's good, maybe he's the guy next year, but like that's not even guaranteed. He has to prove it. The same situation applies with all these day 3 guys. They need to continually prove it to the point where there's no doubt they're good. And with the guy last year, Howell, who didn't even play till the end of the season, I know he suffered an injury early, but they could have played him, and they did not play him. So I don't get the hype. And just translate that to running backs, same situation. Now let's go focus on Dalvin Cook and where he's going to end up. We've seen people talking about all over the place, like, oh yeah, he could end up with Miami. I don't know if he's going to end up in Miami. Maybe it's possible, but like they've already signed 2 veterans. They drafted Devin Achane. Like they're kind of set with what they want to do. And maybe they bring Cook in for cheap, but I don't know. That would be the best case scenario. But realistically, like Cook's in that old bucket where he showed significant decline last year, where you see it happening with these old veteran running backs. Realistically, unless there's a significant injury we didn't know about, which newsflash, everybody's injured every year. It happens. They're not that guy anymore. So if you have Cook, like I would try to sell high. if someone's still buying into it once he lands in quote unquote spot, right? Or if you have someone who's, they need a veteran running back, even though it's only June, but they're craving a veteran running back, right? See if you can go flip him. If you're a contender, just write him out. He's going to give you volume. He's going to step in. Even if he goes to Miami, he's going to be splitting. Or if he goes to Dallas, he's going to be getting plenty of opportunity because, let's be real, the backups behind Tony Pollard are not going to stop Dalvin Cook from playing, right? Rojo's not going to stop him. They're not going to be like, oh, yeah, we got Ronald Jones. Like, no, like these guys are just whatever. He could be the backup in with the Chargers because they need help with Cook, with Eckler. But realistically, like, why would you bring in another veteran running back? Like, that's just another thing, unless it's a short-term deal. Now, you could place them in a spot like Kansas City, which would be fun, but they don't really have money. Same thing with Buffalo. Like, they are cap strained, which is why they're not really spending much money on DeAndre Hopkins. So there's not that many spots. I think the Jets are interesting because they don't have much of anything behind Breece Hall, and Breece Hall is hurt. Another interesting spot is Denver. Like, I like Samaje Perine, but Dalvin Cook's going to replace Samaje Perine if he goes to Denver because you have two guys coming off of significant knee injuries. They need someone to help those guys this year because we don't know how soon they're going to come back. Realistically, like Breece Hall, we're not sure he comes back week 1. We have no idea with Javonte Williams either. Like, there's been good reports, but this is what happens last year. We saw it with these ACL and these significant ACL injuries. Like, they take time to come back from. So it would be a smart move from those franchises to specifically the Jets when they're trying to compete this year with Aaron Rodgers to bring in Cook to help. And then when Breece Hall's ramped up, ready to go, you transition to Breece Hall. You still have Cook playing the 1B. It works for everybody, right? Those are transitioning. Like, Cincinnati's not going to cut Joe Mixon at this point. Like, that's too late. And let's be real, like they actually like Joe Mixon. So there's not a ton of spots for Dalvin Cook to go. Realistically, it's going to be a contender. You're not going to see him signed with the Texans or anything like that unless the market just completely erodes, because that's not how it works. I saw a joke where someone said, oh, yeah, Pete Carroll sizing up another veteran running back. And I go, please, no. We don't need that. But yeah, Cook will see volume this year. He's that veteran running back where it's just a short-term asset in Dynasty where you're just going to ride it out. Unless you have someone significantly overpaying, the value to your team and the points you're getting is worth more than you're going to get. Like, maybe you get an early second-round pick. Cool, yeah, I'd do that in a heartbeat. But realistically, these savvy veteran managers are not going to make that move, right? So you either have to, like, take on Cook as discount, which does a veteran team want to do that? Unless you're rebuilding, then yeah, you're rebuilding, just sell Cook. Like, just get him off your team, because why would you have that veteran on your team when you're rebuilding, right? So you just sell Cook for whatever you can get, move on. A 2, yeah, call it a day. You're done, just like that. That's a win-win for everybody, right? The contender gets Cook, you get second-round pick, help your capital, help you tank. That's ideal. I know people talk about these situations in Dynasty where they want to, like, they won't sell below a certain point, but if you're rebuilding, just get these guys off your roster. They do you no good in a rebuild. They do you no good. So you find an undervalued wide receiver. You go like sell him for Hollywood Brown, right? You do something like that. Or you go to get a second plus Rondale Moore. Like, you find guys where you can find value spikes in them, because you're not going to get a top 20 Dynasty like wide receiver. Maybe you move him for like a Michael May or something like that. You find a tight end in non-premium tight end leagues, right? You kind of find guys that are a little bit undervalued going in that middle second round. You could try Kendrick Miller, but I don't think people would even do that for Kendrick Miller right now, the way the market is on him. If the thing with A-Chain is his value is going to tank if Cook ends up in Miami. So they'll make a chain like a discounted buy. Yeah, the chain's really good. And I'm not super worried about Cook being there. Yeah, it would hurt this short-term production this year, but he's a rookie. He has multiple years behind that. So just keep that in mind with Dalvin Cook. It's going to be interesting to see where he winds up. My best bet is either Dallas, LA, Jets, Denver, or Miami. I would expect him to land one of those teams. And there could be someone else that goes, hey, you know what? We still like Dalvin Cook, because teams do weird stuff all the time. So keep that in mind. Just kind of want to touch base on Dalvin Cook. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing what happens and shakes out the rest of this week. It's going to be really interesting because we still have Ezekiel Elliott unsigned. We still have Leonard Fournette. We still have Kareem Hunt, all unsigned. And when those guys go to these backfields, what happens is they have the skill of their earning volume, and they might be inefficient, but the coaches trust them. That's the thing with these veterans that have proven it over years and years and years. Same thing with Dalvin Cook. Like, he might not be, quote unquote, who he was before, but he's still going to earn volume. That's going to be a problem, right? So, yeah, Minnesota could technically add one of those guys. Like, that RB room is not great. Like, I know we're hyping up McBride and Chandler, but they're day 3 guys. Madison's just a dude. Like, that running back room is not that strong. Cook was holding it up more with name value. I saw someone call it one of the worst backfields in the league, and I was like, pump the brakes, my friend. Like, we don't know that. Like, I get it. So, yeah, one of those guys could come in and absolutely wreck that backfield, right? They bring in Leonard Fournette. He's going to see volume, right? They bring in Ezekiel Elliott, go to see volume. Like, that's just how that works. So keep that in mind with all of these day 3 rookies. They're day 3 rookies for a reason. The odds are stacked against them heavily. So I know people are pumped about McBride. People are pumped about Chandler. But take it with a grain of salt. Like, if you get a good deal and you get a second, immediately follow them. Just get them off your roster. Gone. Like, you had a good run. And if they hit, cool. Like, that'll happen every once in a blue moon, right? But realistically, think of this in pathways and range of outcomes with these guys. Is anyone going to be an RB1 for years? No, because that's highly unlikely, specifically from day 3 guys. They can hit. Like, somebody could be a top 24 guy for a season, but don't expect long-term success with these. That's kind of how you get yourself in trouble, right? You invest in all these running backs, and these day 3 running backs. You're like, oh, yeah, they're going to hit. They don't hit, right? And then you're like wondering, I finished like 7-6. What happened? Looking at your roster, you're like, oh, I was entirely dependent on all these guys. Makes sense, right? You just want to make safer bets. So that's what this is all about. Play Dynasty smart. Think in terms of safety. But anyways, that's the Dalvin Cook news. It'll be very interesting to see where he signs. I'm pretty excited. It's going to have an impact. So Dynasty folks, keep it in mind. But yeah, thanks for stopping in. And we'll talk on later this week.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening?